All right, let's just get right into it. Welcome to this explainer, where we take complex research and break it down into the stories that actually matter. Today, we're cracking open one of history's absolute greatest unsolved mysteries, the 1962 escape from Alcatraz. For decades now, people have gone back and forth arguing whether three men actually pulled off the impossible or if they just met a watery grave. So, we're going to look at the official records, some absolutely wild modern science, and a few shocking underworld secrets to try and figure out what really happened out there.
To really understand the stakes here, we have to go back to the morning of June 12, 1962. Picture this. Correctional Officer Bill Long is just starting his shift. Suddenly, a sergeant comes sprinting in, completely panicked, because an inmate isn't getting up for the morning count. So, Officer Long kneels down outside cell B-150, reaches through the steel bars, and taps the inmate on the head. And as he vividly remembered it, the head just crumbled and flopped right onto the floor. Long jumps back, the alarm bell starts ringing, and literally all hell breaks loose. The birds had flown the coop.
So, Part 1, the impossible escape. Let's look at how they actually got out of what was supposed to be an impenetrable fortress.
The sheer MacGyver-level ingenuity of these guys, Frank Morris and the two brothers, John and Clarence Anglin, is just staggering. For months, they secretly used stolen spoons to literally dig through the concrete walls of their tiny 5x9 cells. They built those incredibly lifelike dummy heads out of plaster, topped off with real human hair they snatched from the barbershop to fool the night guards. And maybe the craziest part? They managed to secretly stitch and glue together a massive makeshift raft and life vests using more than 50 prison-issue raincoats.
All of that meticulous prep leads right up to the night of June 11th. The three men manage to clamber up a drain pipe, get over the barbed wire fences, and finally make it down to the shoreline. They plunge into the pitch-black, absolutely freezing 55-degree water of San Francisco Bay. And it's at this exact terrifying moment that the whole thing pivots from a brilliant prison heist into a decades-long forensic mystery.
Moving on to Section 2, Theory 1, a watery grave. This is the official narrative of what happened after they hit that freezing water.
And right away, you find this massive divide in the investigation. On one side, you've got the FBI. They officially closed their books on this back in 1979, concluding that the men definitely drowned in the bay. But on the flip side, the U.S. Marshal Service. They actually still maintain an active, open case to this very day. They're literally keeping these guys on the wanted list until the year 2026, which is when the escapees would be hitting their 100th birthdays.
The FBI's closed case conclusion basically hinges on the physical evidence pulled from those turbulent waters. Search teams found a floating wooden paddle in the bay that was identical to one left behind on the cell block. They also recovered a washed-up life jacket near the island, and it had deep teeth marks embedded right into the inflation stem. The theory there is that the makeshift seal failed, and those teeth marks were from a freezing, desperate struggle to keep the vest inflated. Plus, about 36 days later, a freighter ship actually spotted a floating body wearing clothing that totally matched Alcatraz prison uniforms.
But hold on, because the official story gets pretty messy here. The San Francisco County coroner at the time, Henry Turkle, publicly pushed back. He argued it was highly unlikely a body would just float around in the open ocean for over a month. He firmly believed the body that freighter saw was actually Cecil Philip Herman, who was an unemployed baker that had tragically jumped from the Golden Gate Bridge just 5 days prior. But because that body was never actually recovered, it remains this huge, hotly debated sticking point.
So, Section 3, the science of survival. Let's look at the hydrodynamic models and what modern tech has to say about their odds.
A few years ago, researchers over at Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands decided to hit this cold case with some 21st century science. They used this incredibly advanced application called 3D hydrodynamic software, which is normally used to predict complex sea level rise, to literally turn back the clock. They built a 3D model that flawlessly recreated the exact tidal currents, eddies, and water flows of San Francisco Bay for that very specific night back in 1962.
They ran simulations of 50 virtual rafts launching off the island, and what they discovered was a total game changer. Survival had nothing to do with swimming strength, it was purely about mathematical timing. If they launched at 10 p.m. like everyone always assumed, the outgoing tide was so incredibly strong it would have swept them straight out into the fatal open ocean. No chance. But if they waited and launched at exactly 11:30 p.m., the tide actually slows down just enough to push them straight toward the Golden Gate Bridge, letting them make landfall. Then the tide shifts around midnight, sweeping all their discarded debris northward to Angel Island.
And here is the absolute kicker. That 11:30 p.m. survival model, it is the only scenario that perfectly lines up with where the FBI actually found the physical evidence. The Dutch model proved that an 11:30 launch would deposit the discarded paddle and life jackets right at Angel Island, which is literally the exact spot the authorities pulled them from the water. It's the first piece of hard scientific proof that surviving that night was entirely possible.
Okay, moving on to Section 4, the mobster and the photo. Science says they could have made it, but did they actually get away? Let's talk underworld secrets.
If you look at the Anglin family's research, they believe the escapees had some pretty high-level help. Infamous Boston mob boss Whitey Bulger actually served time with the Anglin brothers in Atlanta and then again at Alcatraz. Now, Bulger was a huge scuba diving enthusiast, and he later told the Anglin family that he personally gave the brothers water survival training. He told them to steal rubber cement, paint the inside of their pants, and tie off the ankles with black cloth to make makeshift wetsuits, which, by the way, perfectly matches the FBI records of what went missing from their cells. Bulger's ultimate advice to them: flee straight to Brazil, marry some locals, and completely avoid extradition.
Now, it wasn't exactly a clean getaway. The family's records suggest there was actually a boat waiting in the bay to pick them up. But more interestingly, a raft absolutely soaked in blood was found on another island near Alcatraz. And that gritty detail perfectly corroborates historical reports that Frank Morris severely sliced his leg open while sliding down the prison's utility vents, bleeding all over the raft as they frantically paddled out to their underworld rendezvous. For decades after the escape, the Anglin family kept getting these bizarre, unsigned Christmas cards and flowers. But the real wall of silence didn't break until 2009. The escapee's other brother, Robert Anglin, who the authorities always suspected knew way more than he was letting on, made this dramatic deathbed confession to his sister. He looked at her and said, "Your brothers are fine, and I have been in constant touch with them for over 25 years.
Which sets us up perfectly for the single, most controversial piece of evidence in the whole shebang. In 1992, a childhood friend of the Anglins, who also happened to be a convicted drug smuggler named Fred Brizzi, came to the family with a wild story. He claimed that while he was smuggling drugs down in Brazil back in 1975, he actually hung out with John and Clarence Anglin on a farm. And to back it up, he handed the family a photograph that he claimed he snapped of the two aging brothers wearing sunglasses.
For years and years, the U.S. Marshals totally dismissed this photo. But recently, some machine learning experts at a company called IdentTV got their hands on it. They ran that grainy 1975 photo through modern AI facial recognition software, directly comparing the older guys in the sunglasses to the Anglin brothers' original Alcatraz mugshots. And the AI came back with a 99% certainty match. Let that sink in.
To really appreciate how massive that is, you have to know how the tech actually works. The deep neural network isn't just squinting at a blurry picture. It's meticulously measuring the precise distances between about 20 unique anchor points on a human face. It creates this biometric fingerprint that literally does not change as you age or grow facial hair. According to the AI experts, based on the pure underlying math of their facial structures, the men in that photograph are almost without a doubt John and Clarence Anglin.
All right, Section 5, the enduring mystery. 60 years later, where does all this leave us?
Honestly, the sheer beauty of this case is how perfectly these two sets of evidence collide. If you lean toward the official narrative that they died freezing in the water, you have to ask yourself, how on earth did not a single body ever wash ashore in a bay completely surrounded by populated land? But if you look at the hydrodynamic models, the mobster connections, and that AI analysis, and you believe they lived, you have to answer, how did three ordinary guys have the unbelievable discipline to stay completely off the federal government's radar for over 60 years?
And that right there is exactly what makes this the ultimate cold case. Both outcomes seem completely impossible, and yet one of them has to be the truth. So, I'm turning it over to you to play detective today, weighing the lack of bodies against the new AI evidence. If they died in the bay, where are the bodies? But if they survived, how did they stay ghosts for over 60 years? Let me know what you think the truth is down in the comments. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning everything.